great pleasure for the second time. I'm coming for this conference. Last year I had a pleasure in the same conference for talking. I was giving a presentation about a topic called ransomware. So it's pretty interesting. After my session was over, I had a lot of people coming and asking me, "Is this possible?" So I think you know how or what extent ransomware is possible. So this time what I'm going to talk about is about a security-oriented architecture from a process standpoint. I had Mr. Rajaraman talking about a security-oriented architecture from a technical standpoint, so I had to talk from a process standpoint here. So the agenda is going to be pretty simple. I'll talk about the payment gateway process, then I jump into the security development architecture, I talk about information governance, and then I leave it for open questions. I think from morning we have been looking at what is happening in the industry from a cashless economy and things like that. So the most important thing for making us cashless is the integration of the payment across the different areas through a proper channel. So this is the general architecture of a payment process. A user placing a request, it is like a request and response that goes from any client server based architecture. You look at it, user places an order, it goes to the payment gateway, and then it goes to the bank, the authorization is done, and then the response comes. Once the response is a go or a no go, based on that you're either you are able to buy something or get something, or it is getting declined. So this is the simple methodology of a payment process. Very simple, right? Excellent architecture, but what are the other problems? So if you look at it, I don't know how many of you are technical here. Okay, if you're technical, you would be remembering the OSI ISO reference model, the 7-layer models. So that is the base for any of these. So what everyone thinks is if you have an antivirus and probably you're hosting your application on an HTTPS platform, you think that you're secure. Correct? So what happens? What does a hacker think? A hacker generally thinks in the reverse way. He's not straight. He should be more than probably 10 times more brilliant than a developer. And nowadays, what I have seen in my experience and quality is, without Google, no one develops. If I actually stop internet in my organization for 1 hour, the productivity actually drops, because without Google there is no absolutely no development at all. What is wrong in that? It is, if you ask me, there's nothing wrong in that. What Google does is it actually points you to a place where you can actually pick and choose what you want. Correct? For example, if you're coming to this session, you must have already seen these topics. By the time the speaker would have started presenting something, you would have Googled and understood. Correct? But what you have Googled would not be the right thing, because whatever you are seeing in that particular page, that has been written by a person on some other perspective what he was doing. It is not from this or from an angle what this guy is going to present. I've also seen this scenario in a completely different way nowadays in colleges. Earlier when we used to go to college, we did not have this technology. After that, technology came into existence. What we do is we would listen to the professor or a teacher on whatever he is telling. Nowadays, whenever we come in, we sit in any presentation, we will evaluate the presenter. This is what Google said, what is this guy talking about? Right? So nowadays what is happening is we are trying to get information without understanding the context. So what I would like to present here basically is from a process standpoint. If you look at it, process remains the same. For example, every company or every payment gateway has an objective, is to ensure that when a customer is trying to make a payment, the payment is getting authorized, and then he is able to do whatever transaction he wants to do, right? But the way they operate is completely different. It's like a company having an objective. A lot of companies will have an objective. Every company will have an objective saying that I need to make a profit of X. I need to improve productivity by X%. But do you think that they all operate in one strategy? Every company has its own way of operation, right? It also applies to the way of development. And if you look at the models like CMMI, ISO 27001, these are generic standards which help us to define a process in the way we work and not define the way the model wants. The model generally says that you can pick and choose whatever you want, but ensure that you comply to these because these are taken from the industry as best practices, and that is how this model is coined. So let me walk you through the basic elements. I am just explaining you on the basic elements of a payment gateway. Then I will get into the process aspects of it. So these are process, authorization, settlement, and then the services are the payment processing service and the gateways. I would touch upon a little bit on gateways also here. And this is the authorization process, merchant placing a request, and then there is processing happening. It goes to the customer bank, and that is how the entire authorization process starts. This is one side of authorization where you are able to buy something, and the second portion to is the settlement. So once this authorization is done, you are getting your product. What we do is, or from a person who is actually doing a business, he would settle this with the bank, saying that these are the transactions which I have done, and this is the settlement process, how the merchant will be getting paid. All right, now let me come to a gateway. What is a gateway? Can someone tell me? Let's make the session interactive because lunch was just over and we'll have PLS, this post-lunch syndrome. What is the gateway? Let me not show you this. What is the gateway? Anyone? I had a lot of techies here. Okay, right. So it is like a middleman who will actually get some details from you, process something, and they also levy a charge for the service. They interact with the other side and then get you back. So in simple, if you look at it, buying transaction, there is a gateway, there is a merchant account and your account. This happens in any kind of transaction, and nowadays after the demonetization, if you go across India, you can go with a plastic card. You need not have money anywhere, or at least 80% what I have seen, except the small petty shops. Famous gateways, there are a lot of them. I've just picked a few of them. And this is going to be a little interesting. There are three different types of gateways basically. There are COM-based gateways, XML transport gateways, and form-based gateways. Each of these, if you look at a COM-based gateway, it requires you to install a DLL, and with that DLL, you will be able to connect to your hosting server. Okay. It also needs a dedicated SSL certificate. I don't know how many of you have been using HSBC account. I used to use a HSBC account long back, 12 years back. When you have to do any kind of the savings account doesn't need any of the SSL certificate. If you're a business user, you need to get the SSL certificate, get it installed in your system, and then you will be able to access the banking site. This was happening in 2005. Now the technology has changed. So these are COM-based gateways, and it was extremely difficult. What happens sometimes is your SSL certificate will get expired. Sometimes if your system machine timing is incorrect, you will not be able to access it. From a technical standpoint, technical guys will be able to crack it because you get an error code, you Google it, blah, blah, everything, you will be able to crack it. But non-technical people, it will be difficult. So then came the XML transport gateways. You need not have any DLLs getting installed here. They are already installed on most of these servers. So if you go to the DLL library in Windows, you would see a lot of DLLs from a payment gateway standpoint, which is integrated with Windows, and you will be able to access all this without any certificate getting installed manually. So if you are on the system side or an infrastructure side, you will be able to look at what kind of DLLs are getting installed in your system, how the DLLs are, or for example, how Windows integrates these DLLs into each of these operating systems. And it requires an SSL certificate. How many of you have heard about Heartbleed? Okay. Can someone tell me what is a Heartbleed? Heartbleed. You get a mic? Pretty interesting. You'll be able to think why.
So, Heartbleed was a vulnerability in SSL which was exploited to recover certain. So basically, you can use that Heartbleed vulnerability to create a backdoor in the system, and you can retrieve all the information, all your secure information, which is basically secured by SSL certificate itself.
Correct.
So it was a very big vulnerability.
So this people were selling, saying that SSL is the most secure thing. It was sold in the market saying that the secure socket layer is one of the most solid built by, and it was actually owned by the Mozilla group, and they said that no one will be able to break this. So ultimately what Heartbleed did was, from a computer standpoint, anything is stored as zeros and ones. So what they did was basically they started reading the memory address. Whenever you are able to read a memory address, you will be able to crack anything. So if you know how a memory address is getting translated into different commands and syntax, that is how they actually broke the SSL. Probably once you go back home, you can look at Heartbleed virus, and then you can see how this particular hacking was done. It was like a beautiful security installed. No one was trying to see what all instructions was given to the security. There were some good guys who understood what kind of securities are done for SSL. They slowly broke into it and ensured that the security doesn't or it did not have these instructions in place, and they got into it. All right. So anyone who is expert in C, C++ will be able to appreciate the memory concepts. So if you look at C and C++, those are the best languages which actually talk to the computer memory. All the other things, they don't talk to the computer memory directly. If you look at the concept of pointers and things like that, when you know the concept of pointers, you will be able to directly point to a memory location and then do whatever you want. So these are technical things what a hacker will look at. Okay. Now I went to SSL because it was an interesting area, and XML transport gateways requires an SSL certificate. From there, where the technology evolved, and now we are into the form-based gateways, and they don't require any softwares. All these are authenticated, and if you look at it, how many of you have seen the address bar which says this is secure with so and so? You get a green, red, blah blah, everything. So sometimes what happens is you get an X mark saying that this particular site is not authorized, or your SSL certificate is invalid, it's outdated.
Sometimes only. So is it because of cookies or?
It might be sometimes because of cookies, or sometimes what happens is in their side, in the banking side, there would be some error in their certificates.
But generally, most of the banks, this thing are secured login only, right?
Secured login. So what happens is in this scenario, you will not be able to log in, sir. It will never allow you to go to the page, or you have a clause where saying that it would say that this particular page you will not be able to access. So what happens is, once you say that no, I would take ownership and this is a trusted site for me, it will allow it to you.
In that case, now this becomes more of a browser-based thinking, that it doesn't apply across all the browsers, whatever you use it.
Yeah, this is basically if you do not have Java installed in your system, or if your version of Java is old. Sometimes it gets corrected when the latest version of Java is installed, because there will be a mismatch in the versions of Java which is installed across, or which is the requirements. Right now, if you look at it, all the browsers are automatically getting updated based on the recent or the updates that are given by the respective vendors. If in case you are not connected to internet for quite some time, that is where you will get these kind of errors. And what the other option, what you can do is you can add these as trusted sites, and sometimes it works. But the permanent solution, I generally don't criticize Microsoft. Most of the times, Internet Explorer is more vulnerable than others. So because Internet Explorer generally allows you to install all ActiveX. If you've seen, you get a pop-up saying that there is an ActiveX or a Flash content that is required, and knowing or unknowingly we click that, and there's something that gets installed in your system. So generally, from a techie standpoint, we use Mozilla most of the times. So that is why I said I use Mozilla. I would just give a personal recommendation what I do rather than criticizing what is happening in the industry.
Firefox is one of the best secure browser.
Yeah, it is one of the most secure browsers, and it doesn't allow you to or allow unnecessary add-ins to get added to the list of add-ins it already has.
Yeah,
if you look at it, Chrome has a lot of add-ins. Then you have to block each of them one by one. So it is a problem.
Automatic updation always takes place. So how do we know what is, see, we are only an end user actually, okay? So we don't know why this automatic updation is taking place, either from the OS perspective or from the browser perspective. And sometimes it behaves not in the normal way which used to be earlier. So
if you look at any of the upgrades, the problem is we don't read the information. If you go to a Microsoft upgrade that has happened, you can read the upgrade and understand why this patch has come. So it will clearly tell you why this patch was released, when was this released. It will also give you information saying that from how many users this particular error message was collected for this patch to be released. I worked for Microsoft for some time, so I would know how they release patches. And the patch would have a clear definition. They would have tested this across different releases, what they do. If you look at Windows 10, they would, if you go and see the Windows 10 version, it will have 4 numbers to it. So they would have tested at least probably 30, 40 versions of 30, 40 releases, what they have done in Windows, and then only they push the patch out. Irrespective of that, you get more errors in Windows. Right, so talk about some security issues. Most of the times what happens is authentication is a challenge. So very recently, we wrote a page which is very similar to Google. Okay, I would send a greeting card to you. Moment you open that greeting card, it goes to a Google page. And you would not be able to find out whether it will say mail.google.com on top. And I would ask you to enter your username and password. When you enter your username and password, this generally everyone does. But what happens is, from a technical standpoint, if a technical guy is doing it, you can actually see where it is going. Moment you hover your mouse on the login button, it will tell you where it is getting pointed. So you enter your username and password, Google username and password, you click on login, it will show you the greeting. So what I would have got typically is I would have got a username and password to my email ID. So we think that whatever we see, if you see a Google page, yeah, it is a Google page. You will just immediately key in whatever is being asked. The problem is we don't think.
but this as an end user, we doesn't know, when you're going to open it, this generally happens, because most of the time, irrespective of whether it's a social media or even using your own email IDs, we doesn't know this.
I can compare this with a scenario which happens at home. We say that we don't know a lot of things, correct, sir? So whenever we don't know something, what is that we do? We question. We go to a shop. We don't buy anything moment they tell you something. You would have a budget for 500 rupees for buying something, but before you buy a product which is worth 500, you would evaluate at least a product, all the products whatever this guy has, and you would be able to relate saying that okay, I'm going to buy this 500 rupees product because 1, 2, 3, 4 is there, and you have systems in place in your house saying that this is the process which I follow. But when we come out and when we are seeing something new, we would say that no, this is something which I don't know. I am not aware. It is more of understanding the thing and then following it. So this is a typical scenario which I would always relate. It might be out of context from a security perspective. Whenever we try to define a process in an organization, if you see this person, he will be the most process-oriented person at home because it is own money. When you come to the organization, it's organization's money. So when I say this is a process, he would say it is an overkill for me. When you ask him to do the same thing at house, because it's own money, he will follow the entire system, and he will do evaluation of alternates also. This is a practice in CMMI called DAR. It's actually decision analysis and resolution, which talks about whenever you're taking a decision, compare it with alternates. Write 3 alternates and then say what is the pros and cons for each of this, and based on that you take a decision. So when you want to learn something, there are multiple ways in which you can understand this and then start using it. It's more of awareness, getting the right awareness done, and then start following it. So if you look at it, authentication challenges have been the most serious vulnerability, and this is a little old data. If you look at this in 2005, there were around 2.8 billion US dollars was lost in online fraud. Right now the figures are more alarming. It is 10 times more than what it is happening. In India you have a problem because the moment you go to the cyber side of things, it is not handled so greatly. Probably Hari should be able to appreciate and or add more value on what is happening from a cyber cell perspective, because he works with the cyber cell department. There are people who are technical guys who help the cyber cell department to crack a lot of things. And if you see the other side, 98% of cyber crimes are not reported. Not reported. Because, for example, you might be a managing director in a company, and you can't go and report saying that I lost 50,000 rupees. You lose your credibility in the market. Next day, what happens is, if it comes in a newspaper, you will lose all your business. The first thing they would say is, you are not able to secure your own money, and how can I give you business? So 98% of cyber crimes are not reported, probably in India. So if you look at it, and more than that, the 2% even if you go, the process is different. All right, so common fraud related risks, using a stolen credit card. The alarming thing is what happens is, if you go to an ATM machine, sometimes when you insert your card once, you take it out, if it doesn't recognize, you should immediately see whether they have put any device on top of it. There are card readers which will read information from your card, and they would collect all this information and then print the cards, whatever cards they want. So I think in Coimbatore, I remember around 3 years back, there was a guy who was caught with almost 200 different credit cards. He has created all these credit cards with the help of these machines, which would actually read your card, and they will be able to create another card with the same number and details. And you can ask me how they crack it. Probably very recent past, or if you look at it, 60 to 70% of people do not have a 3D or any kind of authentication. The second authentication being set in your card. And if you're doing any international transactions, 3D or OTP is not operational at all. So these are things which the hackers would practice. Hackers are not guys who are outside this place. Probably the next speaker, Karthik, will actually give more details about how hackers look at and things. Now I come into a more interesting thing on an enterprise security. Why enterprise security is required. From here, I would be talking more about how an enterprise should look at defining a process for their organization. So this is a meta model for an architecture. If you look at it, it's more technical. I'm sorry, because I need to talk about this architecture. That's why I'm presenting this. If you look at this entire architecture, I can relate it even to a layman, saying that first and foremost thing, you need to define what is your architectural vision. So for example, if you're trying to do something, architecture is not only in software, it applies to anything you do. So what is your vision? From your vision, you write your business strategy, you have a technology strategy, you have your business principles, you have your vision, and you also identify stakeholders. Stakeholders are of two types, internal stakeholders and external stakeholders. 95% of the people, what they do is, they don't identify the internal stakeholders. they always identify external stakeholders from which who has to confirm saying that, yeah, this is fine. But internal stakeholders are extremely important because they need to get this implemented. From an architect's standpoint, stakeholder management is extremely important. Then we come into the requirements. For example, you would say, what requirements are there? I have seen so many architects. There's one of my friend who's sitting here also. If I ask him to write it, he would know everything, but he would not write it in a document. When I ask him to write it in a document, he would say it's an overkill for me. So what happens is, from a requirements, once you know the vision, from there you come into your requirements. So your requirements should be classified into two types. One is your functional requirements, another one is your non-functional requirements. So functional is, from a business standpoint, how this has to be done. From a non-functional requirements, for example, whether it is going to perform for 1,000 users, what kind of security standards are going to get implemented from an architecture standpoint. So these are two different things which has to get documented explicitly. And you should also write down your constraints and assumptions and what are all the gaps. So if you look at this, a lot of big organizations, they present this very clearly, saying that these are my constraints, these are the assumptions, and for these assumptions, these are my risks. When you don't write down what happens is, I have seen a lot of organizations, they would say, no, this was a risk for me. So the second question from an audit perspective I ask is, you say that this is a risk. What is your mitigation plan? How are you going to mitigate it? There are two ways. Either you can accept the risk, saying that, yeah, I'm going to accept this risk and go to the market. Saying that, for example, you're building an application for 1,000 users. You know that it's not scalable to 1,000. So that is a risk you have accepted and going live. And if in case that contingency, that particular risk occurs, what is the contingency you have? Management has to be presented with the cost-benefit analysis for each of these risks. Because sometimes what happens is, certain risks have a huge cost impact. You can't mitigate that risk without the cost-benefit analysis being done. So these are extremely important. If your first two, your vision and your requirements are explicitly done, that is the basis for you to do your architecture. So there are architectures which involves a 3-tier architecture, where is your application layer, your business layer, and your backend layer. So this is from a software perspective. So if you look at it, there's your business architecture. Till probably 8-9 years back, this particular piece was not there. Information system architecture, and then the technology. Technology will be there, business will be there. People will never ever look at what is the information security or information system architecture we need to have. So you need to explicitly say all this, and then finally what you have to say is, how is that your architecture realization happens. So this is a meta model. With this meta model as a basis, if an architect is able to write an architecture or design an architecture, then writing down his constraints, his assumptions, dependencies, risks, that is where an architecture is said to be fully compliant. So once you do all this, what happens is, there is a software development methodology which comes in line. So once your architecture is done, you would basically get into a design mode, and then you build it, you test it, and then it goes to production. So this is the life cycle for a software product getting built. In that, there are two approaches. One is a proactive and reactive. In my audit life, what I have seen is, people are more inclined towards the reactive approach. They don't want to be proactive, because it's not their money. Most of the times what happens is, whenever I ask him why was security requirements not written, they would say, we had a firewall in place. What is the use of a firewall? A firewall without proper instructions is having a security in front of the office without giving him any instructions. He will allow anyone inside, because you have not asked him to question who's coming inside, who is going out, right? So most of the people choose the reactive approach. So proactive approach is, if you look at it, I have written only security requirements here, because this is a security conference, or else it is the entire requirements properly written, you have a guideline for everything. From a technical standpoint, how many of you have seen coding guidelines? And how many of you follow that in an organization? I have seen code guidelines beautifully written, and you would see the review frequency would be every 3 months they will review it. If I open the code and see, the coding guidelines will be different, whatever is coded was different. I have seen this almost every second time I do an audit, I will be able to see that. The problem is the coding guidelines are written for the sake of process, because the auditor will ask for coding guidelines, they will keep the coding guidelines there. They will cut and piece a small piece of code from Google and then insert whatever they want inside the code. How many of you know about open source libraries? Okay. And how many organizations appreciate the use of open source libraries? Okay. An open source library is something which is available open in the internet. For example, Linux is open. You can download the code and make whatever changes you want. The only problem with an open source library is you don't have an owner tagged for anything. So if I am a smart guy, if I want to get some information, I will write an algorithm, and the person who is reading that code will never validate that algorithm. For example, there is a Huffman algorithm which is written for video compression. I would search Google Huffman algorithm in .NET. You will get 10 links. You would not know which link is valid. You will get generally the first link is the link which you click. You click on the first link, Huffman algorithm. You would never read whether the Huffman algorithm is implemented, because Google has told that Huffman is perfect. Copy and paste it. The second portion of the algorithm, I would have written a code saying that whatever is been done in your application, send the details to me. This guy will be doing a perfect spying job with your software, and I will be able to control your software also most of the times. So open source libraries are risky unless and otherwise you validate them and rewrite these based on whatever your requirements are. So your coding guidelines, your code reviews, and that's where I mentioned about static analysis. Static analysis is like doing a code analysis, not using a tool. Sir will be able to appreciate saying that, yeah, was code review done? Yes, I used JUnit. Using a JUnit is not the end. JUnit will help you to see static code. It would not be able to predict any dynamic code that is there in your source code. So these are techniques which would help you to be more proactive than reactive from a software development lifecycle point. And this is the cost of fixing a defect. If you find a security defect, after it goes to production, A, your reputation is gone, B, your money is also gone. And this is the framework. It is a similar representation. It's a Microsoft security development framework, where in each of these seven phases, you would at least have 3 or 2 activities which are pertaining to security. And security is a part of software development nowadays. It is not outside software development. Okay, I can share this PPT, or it will be easy for you to map and then see from a technical standpoint what kind of measures you need to do from a development life cycle for each of these phases. It's a wonderful way it is represented in this particular slide. Okay, now that we have spoken about development, the other portion what people miss out is governance. That is what I was mentioning. Guidelines will be there, standards will be there, but unless and otherwise you have governance, nothing will work. So if you look at this, what does information governance mean? Simple, organized, consistent, reliable, educated, and measured. So these are the 7 stages in which a governance is generally done. Most of the organizations has software development methodologies. They use all the best practices in bringing up a life cycle. For example, waterfall, V model, agile, Kanban, all this they have. But the governance portion is what they miss out. So if you look at this, simple policy, standards, procedures, and guidelines, ensure that all these are adhered. And this is not from 90% of the organizations, before an ISO audit happens, the 2 days before the ISO audit is where the process work starts. Work will be going separately, there will be 2 people who will be sitting and doing process work. So this, according to me, if you look at it, or probably if you Google and see in the internet, you can see the statistics of Infosys. I can take Infosys because they are leaders in the market. Before they implemented CMM, so capability maturity model, and after that CMMI, their defect leakage percentage, they were 80% perfect. From there they moved to 97%. So if you mean to say that your customer satisfaction rate increased by 17%. And Six Sigma is is not possible in software. So it's only possible in manufacturing, to my knowledge. In software it is very difficult because dynamic requirement changes will be there, and our delivery schedules are always yesterday, not tomorrow. So it is from a governance, have simple standard policies and procedures and guidelines which people understand. Don't write a policy or a guideline which people don't understand. If you write your policy in the most complex way, it's going to lie there. Next is organized. I think this is very simple. If you go to your house, you know how to organize things, keep it in the respective shelves. Moment this same guy goes to a software company, he would put code in one place, he will throw the document in another folder, it will not be organized. So whatever we follow at home from a process standpoint, you should also understand the same process in your organization and start organizing things in the way the organization wants. Consistent. Again, practice makes you perfect, and if you start practicing this, you become consistent. When you start becoming consistent, your quality improves. When your quality improves, automatically XYZ improves. So it says that when you're delivering high code, vitamin M follows you. And then reliable. I was talking about risks. So reliability also comes when your policy has a risk management policy, says that track risks, report risks, and also ensure that your users are proactive, not reactive. Educated. A lot of organizations do not have a training plan in place. They all think that whatever professionals I have are trained. In whichever organization you are working, even if the organization doesn't have a training plan, you write your own training plan and say, in the next 1 year, this is what I need to understand. Or else what happens is, when you try to understand, it would have been old. New things would have come in the market. So create an awareness and also ensure that you participate in a lot of trainings. Measured. This is from a CMI level 5. This can be done only at an organization level. It cannot be done at a person level. So ensure that from an organization standpoint, you're measured. It can be any maturity. It can be a maturity or a capability model. Any questions?
How do you suggest such thing can be minimized? Or, see, and moreover, today everybody is becoming into a tool dependent thing process, because you take a cost of the tool, nobody is willing to invest. Everybody wants to get into an open source tool, and everything has become more open source oriented. Even for that matter, to an extent, even security testing. I don't know how many, I don't know about it, I'm totally new into it, but I'm talking based on what I've read from internet and other things. So how do you suggest that we adhere to some basic guidelines in order to see that we don't foresee many risks when you hit the market?
Okay. From a process standpoint, as you said that we are forced to deliver because customer wants this ASAP and all. So if you look at whatever you have delivered based on customer's need, there's one thing you need to go back and evaluate. Once you give it to a customer, what has he given it back to you? What is your rework for the software you gave it to the customer? So you have delivered a software without adequate testing. Let's assume that you have not done adequate testing, you have skipped a lot of things, and then you have delivered the software based on a schedule that is agreed. Be always perfect in your estimation. An estimation can be plus or minus 10%. But what you can do basically is, you can ensure that all your reviews and reworks are tagged, and then this after the review and rework, it goes to the customer, gets it signed off, and then comes back. This is one thing what we do from a project standpoint. I don't know whether I answered a question, but it is a scenario based question. Depending on the project, I will be able to plan my review and rework adequately.